We're very excited to welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn, Strengthening Vocational Rehabilitation and Tribal Vocational Rehabilitation Through Collaboration. We're thrilled to bring together the expertise of RSA, AIVRTTAC, CSAVR, and representatives from state VR agencies and TVR projects. We're grateful for this collaboration and look forward to sharing these innovative successes and best practices on this important topic as we work together to enhance service delivery and foster stronger partnerships. To kick off our discussion, it's my pleasure to introduce Wayne Daigle, American Indian Vocational Rehabilitation Training and Technical Assistance Project Director. Wayne?
Thanks, Heather. Good morning, everybody. My name is Wayne Daigle. As Heather stated, I am from the Blackfeet tribe in northern Montana, and I work with AIVRTTAC, or the American Indian Technical Assistance Center. We serve 93 projects in 26 states, right around 170 different tribes. So we have a pretty broad range of service area, and we get to interact with a lot of really interesting individuals that are working within those tribes. So I just want to acknowledge all the work from the people before us that helped start this relationship and start the process of having an American Indian Vocational Rehab Services project opportunity. So thank those that came before us in setting that foundation. The difference between state VR and tribal VR really comes down to the traditional values and cultural appropriateness of the services being provided. So it's really important that we focus on that today as we listen to these relationships that have been built, because the cultural component is what's been lacking in services to tribal members with disabilities for a long time. And that's the whole premise of the Tribal VR program being put into place, is to serve those individuals in their home environments in ways that they understand to move towards employment. The other big difference is the discretionary grants category that the tribes are under. So the AIVRS projects every 5 years have to reapply for funding to maintain these services, where states have formula funding that is provided ongoing. And that's the biggest difference in the funding components. And that's why these relationships are so important, because we have to be able to support one another in providing these culturally appropriate and responsible services. I was going to talk about another point, but the person following me is going to cover that point, so I'll leave that one off because I don't want to take all of his thunder. So I'm going to talk about some of the positive stuff that we've seen amongst these different panelists that we're working with today. With Arizona, Kristen Mackey has made it possible to where the AIVRS project staff can participate at the IHD, or Institute for Human Development, annual conference, and they cover that conference fee. So we have great opportunities for that partnership between the AIVRS projects and all of the assistive technology vendors and all of the educational opportunities there. AIVRTTAC has also had the opportunity to work with Oklahoma State DVR and the Tribal VR programs in Oklahoma at their annual disability conference that they host. AIVRTTAC has presented some information and shared different strategies for improving services to individuals with disabilities. And then with Wisconsin, Mr. Draghi, Tom Draghi, has participated with us in hosting the Tribal Vocational Rehab Self-Employment Training opportunity through Montana Rural Institute, to bring in his perspective from the state side and how we can coordinate those services. And also he's a previous AIVRS director, so having that unique perspective allows us to get a lot of good information out of Tom. So I really appreciate that partnership that we've been able to develop between the states and AIVRTTAC in a lot of the things that we're doing. And I want to welcome you all, and I hope that you are able to listen today with an open mind and an open heart so that we can all take some information from one another and not only learn from what we are doing here today in this meeting for you personally, but take it back to your communities that you're living in and working in, because we need to start developing these relationships in order to secure these individuals with disabilities future in employment. With that, I am going to introduce Mr. August Martin. He is the AIVRS program officer for AIVRTTAC. August?
Sheesh, how jeep yachaduasalk kayan gaya chikanadi hunket. My hunket name is Eat. I have a second hunket name because my grandmother couldn't nail down my personality. Kayan Ge. I come from the Chukanadi clan of the Tlingit Nation, from the Nanahit House. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this discussion regarding collaborative relationships between state and tribal VR. As we look at the collaborative relationship between tribal VR and state VR, we can see that it has the utmost benefit for VR program recipients. Uh, uh, as it was discussed to me back when I started as a program director in 1999, uh, our state VR agency director sat down with me and said, "Well, not only is two heads better than one, but two pockets are deeper than one. And you tribal VR professionals have a expertise that we don't." And that was a great introduction, not only from him, but to state VR and how we can collaborate with each other. So when we analyze the Rehabilitation Act, the authorizing act for this project, for this program, we can come to the conclusion that the intent of the law was a collaborative relationship between the many different projects that are described in the Rehabilitation Act, two of which is state VR agencies and Tribal VR. State VR is funded under Section 110, and Tribal VR is funded under Section 121 of the Rehabilitation Act. But the language of the statutory and regulatory languages do point to a strong conclusion that collaborative effort was the intent. Section 101 of the Rehabilitation Act requires state VR agencies to develop a collaborative agreement between the state and the tribe. It is a legal mandate for the states to develop that collaborative agreement with the tribes. And within those collaborative agreements, if you look under Section 101 of the Rehabilitation Act, it will give you some examples of that collaboration. Ultimately, it should be how both the state VR and tribal VR can best meet the unique needs of tribal members. If you look in section or in the implementing regulations, 34 CFR 371 of the Code of Regulations, 371 regulations requires tribes to collaborate with the state VR agency in the development of a grant application. So as you can see within that language, the intent was for a collaborative effort to meet the unique needs of tribal members. So prior to 1973, the indigenous communities of this country were not having their tribal members with disabilities needs met. There was a very vast gap between how state VR recipients and tribes were receiving services. Thanks to the Navajo Nation, back in the late 60s, early 70s, they brought to the forefront the needs of tribal members, specifically the Navajo Nation, and described adequately to not only RSA, but the state VR agencies in New Mexico and Arizona, that their tribal members with disabilities needs were not being met. And in 1973, the Rehabilitation Act was amended to include Section 130, which authorized state and federal recognized tribes to receive funding to provide vocational rehabilitation services. Navajo Nation was the very first tribe to receive their grant, and in the 1970s, I believe it was 1978. Paula Sinius can correct me on that when she presents, but I believe in 76 or 78, they received their first grant, and it was for $600,000 plus. From then, from the 1970s up to current date, we now have 93 projects across the country. That would not have happened if the Navajo Nation did not collaborate with the states that they were talking to include or to include in legislation services specifically for American Indians with disabilities. I'm looking at my notes, so if you see me looking to my right, I'm not spacing out, I'm looking at my notes. So from the very beginning, you can see that collaborative effort was modeled between the Navajo Nation and the state. The tribal VR projects and state VR agencies both have expertise that they can share with one another. Usually the state has like 100 years of expertise in vocational rehabilitation. However, the tribes have time immemorial expertise in the cultural and unique needs of their tribal members. So both the state and the tribes can learn from one another. RSA is confident that this discussion will bring to light those benefits and hopefully reinforce the needs for the tribal and state VR agencies to develop stronger collaborative agreements. From an RSA standpoint, we recognize that we must model that collaboration. So from RSA standpoint, we are in discussions with the State Monitoring and Improvement Division, SMPID, that monitors state VR agencies to develop ways that we can collaborate within RSA and to model that collaborative efforts and relationships for the state and the tribes to build their relationships as well. So thank you again for this time. I will hand it over to, I guess, Heather or Wayne, I don't know who, but thank you everybody for being here. I hope that you gather some information that will be helpful in you developing collaborative relationship with the state.
Thank you, Wayne and August, for sharing a little bit about the history. We enjoyed hearing about the foundational legislation and the concepts of these programs. Now we're going to shift our focus to the present and the future. We're going to dive into our panel discussion where we're going to start looking at how some innovative ideas and collaborative practices are being put into action today. So I'm pleased to introduce our event moderator, Christine Johnson. Christine is a senior technical assistance research analyst at the George Washington University, who's a key partner with the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, the collaborative, lovingly known as NTAC. She's got extensive knowledge and experience in voc rehab and transition services, and she brings a wealth of knowledge and insight to today's discussion. We're going to be in good hands as she guides us through this important conversation. Christine?
Thank you, Heather. And thank you, August and Wayne, for setting the stage here. I look back at my experience. My first experiences working with the tribal programs was when I worked with the Technical Assistance and Continuing Education Center of Region 5. It was the TACE of Region 5 out of Southern Illinois University, and our project director, David Adams. We worked with, we had great relationships with the tribal programs in Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And I was able to attend KNAR, and I look at the audience today and I see some names that I haven't seen in a while, so hello to all of you. Collaboration is required in the law and the regulations, as August pointed out. But we've got to take it from those printed words on paper to actually make it happen and make it effective. So we're going to hear from 3 states today on their approaches to collaboration in order to provide vocational rehabilitation services that are culturally relevant to American Indians with disabilities. My only regret is that we've got about an hour with the panelists because I think we could sit here all day and learn some really great tips and techniques from all of them. But we invite you, of course, to reach out to us after this and find out more about this. So we're going to start right now with the state of Arizona. We welcome Paula Sainez, who is the director for the Navajo Nation Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services, and also Kristen Mackey, who's the administrator for the Arizona Department of Economic Security Rehabilitation Services Administration. So Paula, I'll have you start first. And August kind of already gave us a clue that you guys have, I guess, if my math is right, about a 50-year relationship. And I know you probably were just a baby when that started, but tell us more about how the history began.
Yate, I do need to recognize my relatives. Kisachitni and Shlendo Toy Heglini Bashichin. Ranrati Dashichedo, Ashin Dashinale. I appreciate being invited to this panel today and this Lunch and Learn roundtable discussion on strengthening vocational rehabilitation and tribal vocational rehabilitation through collaboration. The Navajo Nation has a long history of providing culturally responsive vocational rehabilitation services, and as was mentioned, was the first American Indian VR service program in the country. As a program director, I was handed the baton from individual leaders such as Dr. Elmer Guy. I'd like to also recognize Treva Roanhorse, who were instrumental in convincing Congress that vocational rehabilitation needed to be developed from the tribal community perspective, and that traditional state VR models were not effective in Navajo communities. I see my role now as providing continuous quality improvement and ensuring that services are provided to all Navajos and American Indians with disabilities, and that they have access to quality services to meet their needs from the tribe's culture and language standpoints. I want to talk to you a little bit about our journey for those years, as Christine mentioned. We're getting close to 50 years. And during those years, during our journey, state VR agencies have been a strong partner in the progress that we made. So it is all about relationships. The Navajo Nation extends into 3 states, and we have collaborated over the years with the state of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. I want to highlight some of the important collaborative relationships and also provide a brief history of the Navajo Nation's journey. We always go back to the Rehab Act preamble that disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the rights of individuals to live independently, enjoy self-determination, make choices, contribute to society, pursue meaningful careers, and enjoy full inclusion and integration in the economic, political, social, cultural, and educational mainstream American society. There's a lot of key points in this preamble that American Indian communities also believe in self-determination, the pursuing meaningful careers, cultural, from a cultural perspective. Indigenous communities have unique strengths and are resilient and have a desire for all individuals to be included, regardless of disability. We also refer to this as differing abilities. The process for a tribal vocational rehab program is for an individual's personal journey with the support of extended family members, relatives, and the community. The Tribal VR program and others in the community, including other service providers, in addressing impediments and challenges associated with realizing meaningful employment in a manner that not only satisfies the individual needs, but is also comes from the support of family and community. This creates a strengths-based approach to service provision. I want to highlight some of our early relationships because our program from the Navajo Nation perspective is based on these key factors of a strengths-based approach to service provision. In the early years, Arizona Rehab Services Administration funded a study that showed there was an increase of referrals to the state VR agency. This resulted in a 3-year innovation and establishment grant from the Arizona Rehab Services Administration to the Navajo Nation to implement the Navajo VR program in 1975. As a result of this innovation and establishment grant, the Navajo Nation developed a comprehensive vocational rehab service plan, introducing affirmative action plans to the Navajo Nation Council. In addition, this was the early building of cooperative agreements with the state of Arizona, with the Navajo Nation, and also the state of New Mexico and Utah. The key point in our journey was, as indicated in 1978, when the Rehab Act amendments were put into place, which also included a partnership with the Navajo Nation and Rehab Services Administration Region 9, who also helped work with developing our program. Federal funding was finally identified in 1981 under Section 130 of the Rehab Act, and there were early developments of the Navajo program from 1981 to 1985 with funding provided under Section 130. And a key part of Section 130 and the American Indian VR programs is for the tribes to provide a 10% match fund. So the Navajo Nation Council has provided a 10% match fund for our programs because, again, we believe in communities and people with disabilities to receive access, to have access to vocational rehab programs. The program developed offices within Arizona initially, and then established agency offices throughout the 5 agencies across the Navajo Nation, including Shiprock, Crown Point, Window Rock, Kayenta, and Tuba City. So as was stated before, collaboration with the state agency is about shared resources. And the Rehab Act requires us to have a cooperative agreement, requires the state to have a cooperative agreement with American Indian VR programs. And those cooperative agreements are formal agreements describing strategies for collaboration and coordination, including strategies for interagency referral and information, sharing information that will assist with eligibility and development of an IPE, individualized plan for employment. Those cooperative agreements also should provide procedures for ensuring that American Indians with disabilities are provided VR services from the state, and also strategies for transition planning by personnel of the state VR agency and the state educational agency. As we look at the collaboration between Arizona Rehab Services Administration and Navajo Nation, the Memorandum of Understanding has been a critical document to help document our relationship with the state of Arizona. It includes several aspects of collaboration. The Memorandum of Agreement can't just be written and placed on a shelf. it needs to be implemented, reviewed constantly. And that's one recommendation that I would have for other tribes, is not to just enter into agreement with the state VR agency and put it on a shelf. Make sure it's a live document and that it gets implemented. Agreements with Indigenous nations should affirm and uphold our ability to exercise our inherent right, jurisdiction, and self-governance to provide services to our community. You need to be at the table to help make decisions and participate in making sure that decisions that are made by the state VR agency are applicable to your communities, and that they do definitely provide quality services to your consumers with disabilities. Another part of our collaborative relationship is to be on the State Rehab Council. We have staff on the State Rehab Council in the state of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and New Mexico Commission for the Blind. We also participate on the State Independent Living Council. So it's very important to be a part of those discussions and conversations. In the state of Arizona, I was the chairperson for the State Rehab Council for a period of time, and I continue to be a part of the State Rehab Council, which seeks input from the community advocates, businesses, industries, and disability groups. It's important for tribal VR programs to provide input to review the state goals and priorities, and making sure that rural and remote communities and our tribal communities are being served. Another aspect of our collaborative relationship is to include in the memorandum of agreements training. As was mentioned earlier, Arizona Rehab Services Administration provides a number of professional development opportunities where they assist with paying the tuition for some of our training activities. Another area is to continue to meet quarterly with the state VR agency. That communication is important. Communication goes both ways too. So we meet quarterly to make sure that our cooperative agreement is being implemented. Again, sharing resources is so critical. So we have a number of joint cases or dual cases with the state VR agencies. Again, they have generally more resources that they have available. So working with the state VR agencies on individualized plans for employment. The Navajo Nation also is a participant on the Community of Practice on Transition for the state of Arizona. Being in a tri-state region and serving Indigenous communities, the schools and services for transition can be complex. Schools can include, on tribal lands, could include BIE, Bureau of Indian Education funded schools, public schools, Bureau of Indian Education operated schools, charter schools, and private schools. So collaborating with the state agency on transition is very important. So I've had an opportunity to work with a team of staff who believe in our vision, and that includes the state VR agency. As we speak, tribes are being contacted and being funded for the upcoming grant cycle. So this is an exciting time for tribal vocational rehab programs. We are definitely making progress, but much more needs to be done. In 2025, the Navajo Nation will be celebrating 50 years of providing culturally appropriate VR services. We are looking forward to the future, and we are looking at what the future will hold in providing additional services. And Indigenous communities will definitely continue to develop programs specifically for their communities and tribes and nations in providing cultural models that will definitely address the unique needs of their tribes, culture, and language. And at this time, I want to turn it over to Kristen Mackey, who is the administrator for Arizona Rehab Services Administration.
Thank you, Paula. Just just want to say and recognize again, you know, the important work that's happened and those that established that before us. And so really provided a nice leaping off point for me as a administrator to continue some of that work. I'll speak a little bit to the memorandum of agreement that Paula talks about. There are multiple tribes in Arizona, and we have agreements with all of them. Each of the tribes has approached that agreement in a little bit different way. And so from a state perspective, really try to be flexible in how we manage the work around that memorandum. Sometimes it's an email back and forth, and we redline items and have emails and agreements in that fashion. There's been an opportunity for me to take our local leadership, and we have worked directly with the local leadership on the tribe. We review that MOA together. We discuss what's going to work, what's going to help, how can we assist each other, what services are needed, and build those things into those MOAs. And so, as Paula indicated, it really is a living document. We want to make sure that it's fresh and that it's reviewed and that it's meeting the needs of the American Indian tribal entities. We are blessed to have Paula. I don't know how she does it with all of the three states, and I know she's a mentor to many others. She is on the state rehab counselor as ex officio and meeting on those silk committees and the coordination across all of the different councils and commissions and boards, all of the individuals that are working to meet the needs of individuals with disabilities wherever they live. It's really important to have that collaborative working relationship ongoing and across the different entities that are meeting to make that happen. I want to touch just really quickly. We talk about resources. We definitely have additional resources that we can use, but in a world of vacancies and difficulty in keeping and recruiting members, we've done a little bit of a collaborative agreement with our Sonoran USED. We work with our Sonoran USED, Paula works with them, and looking to build capacity in terms of providing services on and near the land. We don't want to make people drive to us. We are hoping to get those services on and near where folks are living, so that they can participate in their own environments. And so we're really excited that we've been working on it. It's been a little bit of a work in progress, but we're excited to look at project search sites in the Navajo Nation. I'm also excited to have been working together to expand our pre-employment transition services to a number of different tribal entities across the state. So just a little bit of the work that cannot be done outside of the direct collaboration with each other. I do want to just leave us real quick with a success story. We had a work-based learning opportunity for a young individual to work at the Navajo Nation Museum for the summer. This individual was thrilled to be able to work over the summer, learn tasks associated with keeping the museum stocked and clean, did some of the activities in the cafe, set up for events, and then was able to participate in those cultural events. At the end of that work-based learning opportunity, the staff was so appreciative. They threw her a pizza party and said, "Job well done." This young individual never would have experienced those 6 weeks of learning opportunities in her own home, on her own land, had it not been for the collaboration between the Arizona VR program and the tribal entity at Navajo Nation. So again, just a ending with a little success for the people that we serve.
Well, thank you both so much. I wouldn't call it a little success. For that student, it was a big success, and it may be one of the highlights she'll remember when she's old. So thank you so much. Now we're going to hear from Wisconsin on the state of their mutual work plan they have in place, and talking about the strengths that they both bring to the relationship and collaboration. We have with us today Kim Milik, who is the director for the Great Lakes Intertribal Council, the VR for Native Americans program. We have Maria Navala, who is a VR counselor, also with the Great Lakes Intertribal Council. And we have Thomas Draghi, who is the program manager with the state of Wisconsin's Department of Workforce Development, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. So, Tom, I'm going to ask you to start us off and talk a little bit about the uniqueness that you have going on there in Wisconsin.
Thank you, Christine. I really appreciate the time to share the information with all of you nationally in relationship to the bonds that we formed here in Wisconsin. And I would be remiss without recognizing some of the people who worked with our tribal programs and our state program in the past to really get us to where we are. Mr. R.F. Truesdale, who worked with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation as a program manager in our central office, and Stephen Corky West with Oneida, and Jeff Muse with Great Lakes Intertribal Council. That's really where it began back in the late 90s. In 1997, there was a Native American initiative here in Wisconsin to pull together tribes or a consortium of tribes that were willing to look at these VR grants, the vocational rehab grants, and take a look at that. And so our history began in 1997 with workshops related to preparing for these grant applications. And it was a joint venture between the state and our tribes, and we hadn't had any vocational rehabilitation at that time. So through a couple of years of working together, in 1998, Great Lakes Intertribal Council in Oneida were funded for their first VR grants. Lakota Ray Tribe followed in 1998, and the College of the Menominee Nation followed in 2008. So our histories really began back in the mid 1990s, and I think one of the things that Christine, you talked about earlier about collaboration and print to practice, the law requires us to have these cooperative agreements, but we found that in order for them to be successful, going from print to practice, it was really about relationship bonding, similar goals, and really about trust. And many of our tribes have had issues with state agencies and federal agencies. And I think it began because there was a trust factor and there was a genuine need for VR services on the reservations in Wisconsin. And our state agency recognized that through the leadership they had at that time in the 90s. And so we've grown to the point where we're at right now. And it's been very unique because our relationship has really grown to the point where DVR assigns a counselor liaison to each of the tribal VR programs. But not only are we assigning a liaison to the tribal voc rehab programs, we're also assigning a liaison to the tribe itself. And we do that for two reasons. Number one, to have that cohesiveness with the VR grant so that we can collectively serve individuals living on or near the reservation, but also to show tribal leadership that we as a state agency are committed to bringing VR services, not just to their VR program, but educating all of their departments and divisions within the tribe. So it's really enhanced our ability to grow our relationships with not just the tribal VR programs, but our tribes in general. And I think by doing that and forming the collaborative relationships and agreements that we have in place, those have been critical for the success, because the success of our collaboration and relationships is really about the relationship at the local level between our counselor liaisons that work and serve individuals on or near the reservations, but also that bond that is formed between the counselors and the tribal VR program and the staff from the state agency. We're fortunate to have really good representation in Wisconsin with our tribes, and I'll let Maria speak to the counselor liaison roles, because I think her examples are going to give people that idea of how do we go from print to practice, and how does this look in real time in our communities. So Maria and Kim, I'll let you speak to this a little bit.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. My name is Maria Nevela, and I am a counselor for Great Lakes Intertribal Council. I have been here for 20 plus years. My mentor was August Martin, So I appreciate August, see your face, and wanted to say hello, and John. So with that, I'm just going to give some examples from a counselor point of view. And one of the things when I first started was I knew there was a state, and I knew that we had to work with them, but they didn't know about our program. And so I was kind of like a pesky little fly. I would go up to the DVR and I would ask the counselor, I'm like, can you teach me more about the state, and how can you come out here? And they didn't even know about our program. So again, I would call them up and I would be, please, let's meet together and how can we help? And slowly, little by little, we started that bond. I think even before the tribal liaison with Tom. And I needed help to learn the program, to learn how to be a VR counselor. And through the years, some of those individuals retired, and then the state had hired the tribal liaison. And so I just want to talk a little bit about one of the things, or several things that we do with counselor to counselor. And we go to the schools. We have 13 school districts that we cover. And so the tribal liaison, her name is Mackenzie, and we started share riding and going to the schools. We started networking with the schools and having the LD teachers come out and bring our students, and then we would share talking with the students, and that was a good talking point as far as to include the state and include tribal. And August, you had said it, 2 counselors are better than 1. So we do that outreach with the schools, and then throughout the year there's different type of expos. There's family youth night, there's job fairs, and so Mackenzie and I, we share that table. So when our clients come and or the community members come, there's our program and the state program side by side working together, explaining our programs to them. And we joke around, we have fun with the families, and the community members get to see that. And there's that trust that is built between the state and our tribal VR program. With that, talking about client cases, that one-on-one with our clients. And we sit down, whether Mackenzie comes out to the reservation to our office, or I go into the town where Mackenzie's at and into her office. And that shows that the clients have the best opportunity. If they have lack of transportation, that they can trust the state, and vice versa, they can trust us too. One of the other things that we do is we have sobriety feasts, and our Mackenzie and Christine Myers, they come out to our sobriety feasts. They talk about our collaboration, but they also learn our culture, and they're open to it, and that is amazing. That is truly amazing that they want to learn about our culture, because then they can have that connection one-on-one. Say if a client doesn't want to work with our program, that counselor with the state has that knowledge, and they can understand and connect with the clients. Let's see. I'm just looking at, so we each have unique services that we can offer to the client. And one of the things is the state has more resources to have that job developer, that job development. And so we take advantage of that. I call them up and I'm like, hey, I need a job developer and for this, client. And they're like, well, let's get the client signed up. And so, we have that I'm not going to say better service, but it's a more empowering service to help, the client. We have the culturally Native American cultural services, and that is something that, the state didn't know about. So our program can provide that. And with our policies and procedures, we all have our own policies and procedures. Some services on our program are slower. And some services the state can provide faster. So the overall, that client is benefiting the best that, we have with that collaboration. With that, by bringing out our DVR tribal liaison, other programs, not just our program, but other programs can trust the state, and they can make those connections and make the referrals from other programs, whether it's Indian Child Welfare to help that, or TANF, any other program will know who our state tribal liaison is without DVR, our program being involved. So some of the things that I have noticed is our tribal liaison and Tom, and overall the DVR, they keep their promises, and that's amazing. They keep their promises, and they are there for our clients. And so with that, those are just some of the little things that we do in the state of Wisconsin. And so I am lucky. As a counselor, I am so lucky to have this networking, this collaboration, and even outside of DVR and outside of VR, I have friends, so that's amazing in itself. So with that, I'm going to pass off to Kim.
Thanks, Maria. I'm also just going to talk a little bit more about collaboration too with our state partners. Excuse me. We attend conferences together, national ones, local ones. We meet quarterly with them, and that's something we all look forward to. As Tom said, there's a lot of staff turnover all over Wisconsin, so it's kind of like starting all over. Every few months, we try to give cultural trainings as much as possible. And the state invites us to a lot of their meetings, such as they have every 2 years, they have an all staff meeting where all the state people, the whole state pretty much goes to. They have invited the 4 tribal VRs there. And we are going to do a small presentation to them about cultural activities and things. So we kind of do what we call it a 101. Tom always helps out with that. We actually just did a joint drug use abuse type of a conference where it was the state and tribal people who planned it. We got the speakers, the place to have it, and we're going to do that annually, and it was amazing. It brought a bunch of people together. CANART, for those who don't know, it's called the Consortium for Administrators of Native American Rehab. They have annual conferences, and we started inviting our partners. Well, 2 a year would go for quite some years, but now we had like 9 go to the last one. So the state partners are coming to us. They learn a lot of things about the culture of all the tribes all over the US, and that's a wonderful thing. As Maria said, we sit at the tables together, we invite them to powwows, we invite or introduce them as our partner. And so like she said, when the community sees us getting along, they're more interested. They have the trust issues, and it does help a lot when we're together. So we go to conferences as much as possible. Tom is always sending me emails about he'll see a conference somewhere that might be interesting to us. So then I share it with all of our teams in our state, other states, tribal VRs too. There's 4 tribal VRs in Wisconsin. We all work together. We all know Tom very well, and we know his team and the liaisons, and it's getting better and better. So it's just a wonderful thing, like Maria said. We are really grateful for our work with the state. That's it for me.
Thank you, Kim. And just to wrap this up for Wisconsin, I know we have some more speakers. You heard from Maria and Kim, but really this is about building trust, and actions speak louder than words in the cooperative agreement. If you heard, keeping promises, showing up, we work through our challenges and conflicts, and Kim makes a good point. There's been pretty good staff turnover on the state of Wisconsin side. So we're always making sure that there's people invested in wanting to be the tribal liaisons. And for us in Wisconsin, it's really about increasing collaborations and closures, and really looking at successes. And I have to applaud our team in Wisconsin and Kim's staff, particularly Maria, and she referenced my staff, Mackenzie and Christine. Without those local collaborations and relationships, we couldn't have successes. And we've had numerous self-employment successes in Maria's area with some very successful small businesses. And so it's really critical to build on those collaborations and keep those bonds formed. And I think Maria made a good point. Many of us are friends outside of work, and I think that's very unique and very, very different. And we can strengthen those bonds at conferences and at work, but we're collectively working and doing it for the consumer and the relationship, because as Maria said, having two counselors work for a person, that's pretty empowering, to have the culture aspect and then have the vocational rehab or the state behind them too. So I do want to applaud and thank all of our partners in Wisconsin, the College of Menominee Nation, Lac-Courte and Great Lakes Intertribal Council, and the Oneida Tribe for being able to be there and teach us and teach our staff that are non-native the ways of our people, because we have 11 federally recognized tribes and they're all different in their own way. And so to have that relationship, it's very critical. So I thank you, Kim, Maria. I think that's the final words from me anyways, which I could talk forever, and Christine knows that. So I'll be quiet now.
That's so true, Tom, but thank you so much. This was great. Okay, thank you. Now, last but not least, we're going to hear from Oklahoma, and they're going to highlight their cooperative agreement and the importance of that tribal liaison role in the state. So today we are joined with Emma De La Cruz, who is the Vocational Rehabilitation Director with the Muscogee Nation, and we have John Ringlero, who is the tribal liaison with the state of Oklahoma's Department of Rehabilitation Services. So Emma, I'm going to turn it over to you and to talk about this relationship and collaboration you have going on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Heste Estongo. I'm Emma De La Cruz. I am the Program Director for the Muscogee Creek Nation Vocational Rehabilitation Program. We're located in Oklahoma. First, I would like to thank you so much for letting me participate and have this opportunity. And I will just go right into talking about collaboration. So the Muscogee Creek Nation is a long time VR program. We are 26 years running. No, we're not the oldest, but we have been here a day or two. For us, collaboration is very important. As someone said earlier, the state has more funding, and it's just more bang for the buck for the client. And as Tom said just a little bit ago, when you have, both parties, the state and the tribal VR working together, it's more support for the client. And you can never have too many people in your corner pulling for you. So it's very important for the collaboration. Some examples for us, the tribal VR programs with our cooperative agreement, we share a lot of things with the state, as does the state with us. Our little cooperative agreement is a little different than everyone else's. Our cooperative agreement has not changed over the 26 years. Some have, and I know the state developed a cooperative agreement that was generic and across the board. Some programs signed on for that. Ours stayed the same. A few others drafted their own. So I'm not sure what everyone's looks like, but we have a lot of interaction with the state. We cover 13 counties, so that's a very large area. And so there are several different locations of VR offices for the state that we work with. So some of the programs. I mean, some of the things that we work with the state is, of course, we will work together, going out and meeting clients. We'll meet each other. We share office space. What are some other things? So if we have a client in common, and if the state has them first, they refer them to us. If we get the client first, we refer them to the state because they get more support that way. If the state writes a plan before we write a plan, they'll share that plan with us. We write a plan first. We share our plan with them to make sure there's no duplications of services. We will actually sit down and meet a client together and both do our initial interview together. We'll write plans together just to make sure that the client is getting everything they need and the best support. We try to make sure that the services are tailored for the client, and a role with the counselors and the tribal liaison. This is a very important area. This position serves as a vital bridge between vocational rehabilitation and tribal rehabilitation. This fostering enhances communication, trust, collaboration by understanding the unique culture, context, and challenges faced by tribal communities. The liaison can advocate effectively with both the tribal VR and the state VR programs. This ensures that services are tailored to meet the specific needs of the tribal member. This role is critical in facilitating open dialogue and addressing potential misunderstandings. Sometimes things come up when two entities are working together, and maybe it's just clearly a misunderstanding, or somebody said something that was taken the wrong way, again, a misunderstanding, and the tribal liaison can always step in and help with that. This is building stronger, trusting relationships that lead to more coordinated and culturally sensitive services. Very important, culturally appropriate services. If you're not in the realm of doing that on a regular basis, that can slip through the cracks. So it's important that tribal VR is involved to help with this. Ultimately, the counselor and the tribal liaison position enhances the overall effectiveness of the rehabilitation efforts, empowering tribal members to achieve their vocational goals. Some examples with the tribal liaison and the counselor has facilitated better services and relationships. Given the location of our office, we're in a very rural area. There's not much around there. The state doesn't have an office in our area, and we will open our door and let them come in and see their clients there. They do the same for us. We will go meet clients in the various locations that the state has. Our TVR staff and the state counselors, we keep the line of communication open, picking up the phone, calling them, seeing if they have anyone, dropping in, seeing them. They do the same with us. We'll meet the clients together. We share all of our information. If ever we need anything, sometimes John will just drop by our office to say hi and see if we need anything. We can always pick up the phone and call him. The state administrators have done the same thing. We always have that line of communication. They try to come by to our office and check in with us, attend any events we have going on. And the same thing with AIVRTTAC. They've done the same thing. They not only provide assistance just to TVR programs, but they extend out to the state as well. I think there's a real good foundation for success in collaborating with the vocational rehabilitation state and TVR. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Emma. As Emma said, my name is John Ringalero, and I am appointed as a tribal liaison for the Oklahoma Department of Rehabilitation Services. And let me just say, it's an honor to be part of this distinguished panel to the Navajo Nation, forebearers of tribal VR. And, her name was mentioned, matriarch in tribal VR, Ms. Roanhorse. And I also want to recognize Dr. Gassioma, who brought an educated approach and methodology, in my experience, to the tribal VR. These individuals, we would maybe consider them elders. They remind us of our history and our tradition, and how um, uh, to be proud of what we do in tribal VR. Also, to be part here with Wisconsin TVR and Wisconsin DVR. They've mentioned, and what you might want to take notice of is how insightful that they are in their early effort to impart cultural knowledge to the state service providers, and that they continue to provide that cultural knowledge to young people that participate in their program. And we here in Oklahoma, um, we also share a long tradition of tribal VR services. Some of the programs here started in 1992, which is significant because the state of Oklahoma only established a standalone agency in 1993. So some of these programs are just as old as the state agency in itself. In Oklahoma, there are 39 tribes, nations here in Oklahoma, 10 of which have tribal VR programs. And 8 of the programs were established from 92 to 98, so in the 90s. And then one program was established in 2010. And the most recent program established in 2021 through the Department of Ed, Rehab Services Administration. I was asked to address what we do here in Oklahoma, and how we, Oklahoma State Agency and the tribal programs, work together to increase participation in state VR services. But I always like to remind individuals that the mission that the tribal VRs took was to increase participation in state services by Native people who continue to be underserved, but they this cooperative effort and this collaboration have definitely increased participation by natives in the state system. But you've all really heard the message. Thank you again to the other programs, that there's no substitute for that relationship between the state VR offices and the tribal VR offices and staff. But I want to, in a way, express my own. If I know, I wanted to recognize those individuals, Dr. Gassioma and Ms. Ronhorst, because I feel some way speaking in front of them. You know, they were my teachers, my mentors, and I apologize, you know, speaking in front of them. But our our cooperative agreement between Oklahoma and the tribal vote programs, of course, there's an outline of service, and Emma basically told you a little bit about how we hope to be involved in the process from initial interview to closure, and so that is basically outlined within our cooperative agreement. I think some of the things that I'm just going to highlight a few, but during the time we have an IPE development, and we try to make state counselors aware of that difference between the level of funding between the state and tribal voc rehab programs. So there is language in there about something that we call kind of a, what do you call it, a little method there of the state would acquire a larger amount of the cost. It's even expressed as like an 80-20 kind of rule of thumb. It's not always something we do. Sometimes the tribal programs will have a chance to do certain services, or the process of providing services sometimes requires one agency to provide that over another. I'm thinking of things where we've done collaborations on, certain capacities that the state has that tribal programs will not have, but let's say a home modification, where that's a very extensive service, requires a lot of individuals with specific knowledge to guide the tribal programs in cost sharing something in that kind of an effort. So we do have that within the IPE plan. I didn't want to go in depth into our specific cooperative agreement. And as Emma said, the Muskogee Creek Nation has their own cooperative agreement, an individual program with the state of Oklahoma, and so does the Cherokee Nation, and the Wichitas also have cooperative, but the other 7 share in a way the same cooperative agreement. So that's the one that is easiest for me to talk about. But we are very happy also to have the Oklahoma Department of Rehabilitation Services administrators who strongly support tribal programs. We have quarterly meetings with the 10 tribal programs, and there's great participation by our leaders, and I want to thank them, for being a part of that and making a commitment to the tribal programs. In that respect, we also try to share training. This has been, some of the programs have talked about this. The state of Oklahoma has a new employee or new staff or new counselor academy. And at times when the tribal programs will have new staff, those individuals are invited to participate in that part of academy that focuses on the VR process, and so it does give us some time together to work out the way that the tribal programs and state VR approach this same process of providing VR services. So that's always good. We also have the Oklahoma Tribal VR provides we've been slowed down a little bit by the COVID era there, but we do have a annual training event put on by the Oklahoma Tribal VR programs to impart hopefully some cultural knowledge, and basically to build that relationship that everyone has talked about between the staffs of the tribal program and the state VR offices. But we have a few days together to work out some different things that we see that would aid the tribal effort, and also to improve services to individuals who are using both agencies. One of the final things that's I don't know if this is unique to Oklahoma, but I think it expresses again the commitment that Oklahoma has to the tribal programs is the Oklahoma cooperative agreement with the tribes includes a funding contingency plan. And as August knows, there's a lot of factors in programs being refunded. And sometimes when a program is not refunded, the state of Oklahoma will entertain a proposal from the tribes to help them to continue the services until they can access another grant competition and hopefully be funded again. So it's a real good agreement all the way around. Even the programs that have a separate agreement, they're really I think that they basically outline the capacities that each of the agencies, the tribal VRs and the state agency, they outline the capacities, and within the process of providing tribal VR, we do the best to fill in the gaps that we have and the capacities that one doesn't have. We hopefully address it together, and we're very happy. We want to get to where we're like Wisconsin. We ought to bring the whole state of Wisconsin to Oklahoma is what we do. Yeah. So, but I do tease them a lot because, but the only difference is Oklahoma's just got a lot more tribal, tribal headquarters and tribal governments than Wisconsin does, and also a lot more tribal programs. So it does make for a challenge to keep everybody together. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this and be part of the circle. And like I said, to my mentors here in VR, still listening. You guys, thank you for all of the knowledge you've imparted to me over the years, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much. This has been great. I really like what you ended with there, John, to say we're still listening. And so, still listening. This is the spirit of collaboration, to listen, right? Many thanks to all of our panelists today for sharing their perspectives, their wisdom, and the specific practices and actions that you've shown that really work in collaboration in order to provide those culturally relevant services for the American Indians with disabilities. Again, the law, the regulation, the cooperative agreement, the policies, the procedures talk about collaboration, but it's really a process. And I think we've heard that today. It is, in order to be effective, you have to show up and be present, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, having that cohesive mission to serve those individuals with disabilities in achieving their goals. So I can honestly and with confidence say that if all of these panelists here today were at KNAR or any other big event or party, that they would have all run up to the table to purchase raffle tickets, because they all know, and buy, as Tom would have probably tried to buy all of them, but all of our panelists know that they look at that fine print on the program and on the raffle ticket that says, must be present to win. And I think you guys have all shown us that showing up is more than just being there physically, but you're in it to win it. And this is just a small look at nationwide some of the great things that are happening. So I'm going to, I think we have a few minutes left, Heather, and if there are any questions that need to be answered from anyone.
Yeah, so participants, you're here. If you want to drop your questions to any of the panelists in the chat. We did have one come through. It said the panelists all mentioned the open communication and the relationship between the state VR leadership and the tribal entities. For those who may not have that open relationship just yet, or maybe there's been a change in leadership, what tips would you have for folks for starting that relationship? What would be your best advice on how to work with new leadership and to open that relationship?
This is Paula. I can go first. We invited the new leadership to our communities. So there's 6 tribal VR programs in the state of Arizona. And so Hopi would host one of the meetings. We would share a meal. We would have community members come and introduce themselves to the state VR leadership. But they invite them to your home community and your tribal nation. And it's a learning experience. It starts to build that trust, as was mentioned earlier. We posted the Tribal VR programs in reviewing our case files to give us recommendations on how we can improve collaboration. And so we didn't share the names, August, but anyway, we allowed them to review some of our processes to improve. So I think inviting folks to your community helps in building that trust and relationship.
I think this is Tom Draghi from Wisconsin. I think Paula's right on. And I think from the state agency side, having the openness and willingness and having those people who want to be committed to the mission and the collaboration, having them go to the reservations and meet with tribal members, tribal community organizations, be a part of a meal or an event. I think understanding that there's communities within our community and there are some differences, but understanding that persons with disabilities, it doesn't really matter, where you're from. They have the ability to gain the experience from 2 agencies. And I think it's just the willingness and openness to be a part of that movement and collaboration.
This is Emma, and I agree with Paula and Tom. We show up at the state office. We show up, we'll bring snacks, we'll sit and visit. We call them, we invite them in to our programs. Anytime we host an event, we call them. If they have something going, we always offer to participate. And I think that just shows them that we are wanting that relationship as well. And I think just stepping up and stepping out there is saying a lot.
Yeah, I just also wanted to add that if one of the agencies, I'm not sure whose question, what agency that person came from, but disability awareness activities that the state has, we do our best to make sure that the tribal programs are available to be part of that, to also be part of any kind of transition. We have an Oklahoma Transition Institute that the tribes come and participate in. Also, the state will sometimes, it's slowed down some because of the COVID, but starting to pick back up. They have what they call grand rounds, where different individual state offices will staff cases, and they invite the tribes to come over and just to see that, the job is similar and that you can gain some good knowledge by watching and listening to the discussion of how the state workers are trying to address providing services to their clients. So it's offer that meal. That's what I tell them all. Make sure that it's a good meal. So yeah, but those are just some things that happen in Oklahoma too.
And I just want to say at this last KNAR, we had representatives from the state of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and I'm sure I'm leaving out some states as well. And, just being a part of that KNAR event with other tribes and other states, I think was very helpful. I don't know, Kristen can say if it was helpful or not.
Yeah, this is Kristen. Absolutely. It's something that we put on our radar in terms of what do we need to plan for every year and how many folks can we plan to attend. It was fantastic. It was here in Arizona, so we got to send a few extra people this year. But yeah, fantastic learning experience, ability to connect and experience. I think Paula said that before too, when we did the round robin at the different nations, and really from a perspective, a state agency perspective, the staff learning, being a part of what each of those different tribal nations in their community was really impactful.
For
And I
those
would
who may not
say
be familiar with KNAR, Krista Martin dropped the link into the chat about what KNAR is. So if you're not familiar with KNAR and what they do, there's a link right to that resource so that you can learn a little bit more about KNAR.
So
If
Heather,
I
I'd like to
could
add.
share, oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'll jump in first and I'll let you go, August.
Okay, thanks.
I just wanted to add one piece of the relationship building that I think is very important, is that the recognition, acknowledgement that tribal VR and state VR are equal partners. It's not that states over tribal VR. That's a lot of the old concept that we've seen and had to battle. So a tribal VR project director is equal to the state director, and so that relationship is a very important one to recognize and acknowledge. A lot of times when we start to work with states, we get pushed down to like an assistant director or a regional coordinator or something like that, and that's not appropriate. It's director to director, and so not to kind of be adversary, but just to have that acknowledgement that they are equal programs coming to the table together in a government to government type fashion. August?
Yes, quite true. Yes. They're both funded under the same part of the Rehabilitation Act. So yes, there's equality there between the state and the tribal directors. But what I wanted to say real quick, what I will say real quick, is that if there are state VR agency representatives on this call, what you have heard from our panelists here who are Indigenous is that they're very welcoming for you to come onto into Indian country and to learn more about our identity as Indigenous peoples. But you have to be willing to become a part of the community too, and be willing to do what it takes to become a part of that community. When I was teaching the Oyate project out at Western Washington University, one thing I would tell my students is that we had a big, tall Arkansas gentleman who was a Baptist preacher come into our village back in the early 70s. He was 6'5". He wore the cowboy hat, he had the cowboy vest, and he wore cowboy boots. And he stuck out like a sore thumb in our village of us shorter Indigenous people, all of us who are 5'8" and around there. I don't mind saying my people are kind of shorter than some of you who are Lakotas, who are tall giants. But in any case, he came in, and the way he came in, he didn't come in saying, you have to do this to become a part of this church. He came in and said, ask the people of the community, what do I need to do to become a part of this community? He showed up at funerals, he showed up at dedications, he showed up at ceremonies, he showed up at dances, he showed up everywhere that our Native communities were having events, and was just there. And soon enough, he learned what it meant to become a part of that community. And I'm really confident that many of the Indigenous VR projects in this country would have the same welcoming spirit if you were to say, let me become a part of your community. How do I do that? And that would be so beneficial, not just to the Indigenous communities, but to the state VR agencies, because the cultural education that you would get from many of the Indigenous communities could cross over to working with many other cultures that the state VR agencies work with on a day-to-day basis. So please, please, please take advantage of that invitation that we just heard from our Indigenous panelists. Go out, ask them, how do I become a part of your community? And take advantage of their invitation. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, August. And we had some comment in the chat that said cultural relevance is key. In my experience, I've had participants quit State VR because they felt like they were treated as a number and that their thoughts were not being heard. Just be aware of the individual's disability to make sure they understand how the program can help them.
All right, I think we have a few minutes left. We're going to hear now from John Connolly, who is the Director of Research and Grants with the Council of State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation, CSAVR. John?
Thanks, Christine. I appreciate it. And I'll try and be brief. I have some great remarks prepared, and I think August and Wayne have deep sixed my remarks, but they had more important things to say. So I thank them because that was all very important. But we've been very happy at CSAVR to be part of the development of this webinar. Certainly want to thank all the presenters, that also our moderator, New Additions, RSA, and Wayne and his team at the AIVRTTAC for supporting the webinar. It is another example of how his Technical Assistance Center, along with the others funded by RSA and the National Clearinghouse on Rehabilitation Training Materials, are working together along with CSAVR and others to support both state VR and tribal programs. I think you hopefully gained a lot of ideas from the panel as to how state VR and tribal VR programs are and can work together to improve the lives and employment outcomes and career opportunities for individuals with disabilities, including those who are of transition age, students, and youth. You heard a lot about collaboration, partnership, building trust, and I believe those stories that you have heard from the panelists reinforce the value of collaboration to better meet the needs of individuals, their families, and businesses. And at the beginning of this, August Martin mentioned the expertise that we do not have. Through collaboration, we can gain expertise that others have that we need, and we can also share expertise that we have that they may need. Also, you heard some of the tips for building collaboration, building partnership, showing up, helping, keeping your word, sharing. So I hope you'll take those to heart. I think it was Christine who said, we need to turn the paper into action, or words into action. So I hope as you go back to your offices, you go back to your duties, you go back to working with your customers, that you'll take to heart the information that was shared and you will use it to better serve them. And I think the tips here are not only applicable to the relationship between state VR and tribal VR programs in the specific customer base we've been talking about, but other customer populations, especially emerging customer populations, and how you can build relationships with them to better serve them. So I thank you for joining us this afternoon. And again, I want to thank our panelists. They did a wonderful job. Thank you very much. And I'll turn it back to you, Christine.
Actually, I think Heather will wrap it up and tell us the important things that we need to know about CRCs and recordings and all that.
Yeah, sure. I'll take it home. And many thanks to all of you participants for taking time out of your day to join the webinar. We hope that this was meaningful and impactful to you. We hope and invite you that you'll share your feedback with us. So if you have other ideas for webinars or future events that you would like to see, we would love to hear about it. So please email us at ncrtm@newadditions.net. We also invite you to take the customer feedback survey about this event. So Madison and Stuart will put that link in the chat. We encourage you to follow NCRTM on X, formerly known as Twitter, at RSA_NCRTM and to sign up and follow all the happenings at NCRTM. We also have a newsletter that goes out once a month. It'll be going out tomorrow. So we invite you to sign up for that so you can stay up to date on all of the happenings and other future events with NCRTM. This event recording will be published, and when it's available, we'll be releasing that in the newsletter. Other than that, we're going to read our disclaimer, and we wish you all a great rest of the day. The National Clearinghouse of Rehabilitation Training Materials, NCRTM, is maintained by New Additions Consulting, Inc., and sponsored by the U.S. Department of Education Rehabilitation Services Administration, RSA, under contract number 91990021C0033. However, these contents do not necessarily represent the policy of the Department of Education, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government. Thank you again and have a wonderful rest of today. This concludes today's event. Recording has stopped.